It's a beautiful day here in Jacksonville, Illinois. I'm letting my son play at the park and figured while he plays I can make a quick video about the pros and cons of what you can find on a census record. So the best part about federal census records, the population ones, is you can get your ancestor and their children's names, first name, middle name, and last name in many cases, or middle initial. The downfall to that is a lot of times the spellings can be wrong, so from census to census, the spelling of their name can keep changing depending on who took them. Also, women like to bounce around between using their middle name and using their first name, and men sometimes too. And nicknames also. They like to use nicknames. So when I first started out in genealogy, I kept finding Sarahs and Sallys and kept thinking they were different people. Turns out they were the same people. Sarah and Sally are used interchangeably. Same as Mary and Polly and many other nicknames. You can look up nicknames from the 1800s, 1900s and stuff. Anyway, so you can get the names of your ancestors, you can get their ages. The downfall to the ages is they vary also. They're never definite, but gives you pretty close, within a few years usually. The worst ages have been off on a census for me was 10 years or more. But usually it's within 2 to 5 year range. Another piece of information you can get off a census is, well, in the newer ones you can get the house number and the street, so you can get their exact address. But in the older ones you would get district, what district they were in, things like that, and you'd get to know if they had a personal estate or things like that. What else? You get to know if they can read and write. On the ones from about 1790 to 1840, you only got the name of the head of household and then the ages of the other people living in that house. In 1900 and 1910, I believe, those two for sure, you get to find out how many children altogether the women had, the wives, and of those total children, how many were still living during that year that the census was taken. Other information that can be found in federal census certain years is if they were a veteran, what war they were in. You get to know if they're handicapped in any way. The best thing about census records is it lets you know the town and state your relatives lived in. It hones in on the general area of a state, and you can track if they stayed in that area or if they hopped states or hopped countries, because I've had a few ancestors that just suddenly went from Kentucky to Canada. They lived there and they were on the Canada census for, I think it was about a decade, 5 years to 10 years. And then I think they ended up coming back over here. Another thing you gotta watch for on the census is I've had some relatives that had a certain surname and they were listed in someone else's household with a different surname. So whoever indexed that census gave my ancestors the same surname as the person who's owned the household. Oftentimes, young children of certain families would go stay with a different family member or neighbors or friends, and they'd be living with that family. And if you're lucky, the census will show the proper surname for those children, and you can tell immediately that they aren't biological children of that household. So you can figure out, oh, well then, is it their niece, their nephew, their grandkids, whatever. Sometimes it'll even tell you if it's niece, nephew, grandkids. Sometimes it won't. But in other cases, the kids will take on the surname of whoever's living in that house, even though it's not their legal surname, and it kind of messes stuff up. I have a relative who had some children with her husband, and then I think he died, but she moved back in with her parents, and those children showed her maiden name. And then she moved in with someone else, and the children showed the father's surname. And yeah, so you just never know. Surnames can bounce back and forth. And in one case, my second great grandparents, I couldn't find this one census anywhere, and I was looking for the way their name was spelled. It was Dane, D-A-N-E, and it turns out I was going, I think, name by name through the census for that county one time, and I found them. They were indexed. It really was Danes. You could tell that's what it spelled, but whoever indexed it, transcribed it, put Dave. So when I kept looking for Dane, it would miss it because the surname was put in as Dave. And then sometimes they switch the surnames. Usually it's last name first, then first name. And then sometimes they do first name first and then last name. So that can cause confusion when they translate and index it. Sorry, there's lots of little bugs here. Sometimes they can be mistakenly listed as their first name for their surname. So then you can't find them. So that's why you should really look. If you're really struggling to find someone, but you're pretty sure they were in a certain town and county, go through every page of the census and look with your own eyes at the spellings of things. There's just so many crazy scenarios that can happen. Another thing that varies a lot in a census is where your ancestor was born. They always list the birth state of the person in the households, all the people in the household, and so many times that state varies from census to census. For the most part, though, the places where they're born are 75% accurate for me anyway. But yeah, census has definitely got cool information on it, helpful stuff, but man, so much of the information on it needs to be taken with a grain of sand, as they say, because from decade to decade that stuff just flip-flops. I had a relative that was like 11, and the next one she should have been 21, she was listed as 30, and then the next one she should have been 40, she was listed as like 20 something. I'm like, what is going on? But sometimes, again, like I said, the indexing, they just didn't see it right and they put the wrong age, or sometimes the age is left blank from the index, like when it first comes up on the screen and shows you the ages, not the actual census, but the little shortcut index window, whatever you call it. It'll show you a little summary of the ages, and there'll be some missing. But when you go in and look at the actual record, the age is there. It's just they either couldn't read it or forgot to translate it or whatever, transcribe it. So yeah, always, any record you're looking at, try to find the original record and look at it with your own eyes, because stuff gets missed, stuff gets mistranslated. I'm so addicted to genealogy, though. It's so soothing for my soul.